I want to talk about the flooding in North Carolina, Georgia, Florida. It is just awful. If you look at any of the photographs or you hear any of the reports of the outages, it is terrible. For example, 30, just a quick Google search, 30 killed in one county after hurricane swamps North Carolina. This is one county. Now, this is also not including those who are unaccounted for and not including all the other counties. So the death toll is going to rise. Many people have lost their homes. Many people are still disconnected from electricity and are having trouble contacting people. Logistics are almost impossible to manage in much of the country, especially in areas that are further away from what would be considered logistical hubs, major urban centers, etc. And it is bad. It is very bad. And so right now, what is important is getting assistance to people as fast as possible, making sure that they can get them food, make sure they can get them water, make sure they can get the power on as quickly as they can, and make sure that people are housed, warm, not getting sick, that diseases aren't spreading, and that the lost are found as quickly as possible, and that, sadly, the bodies are recovered. Because there are going to be more bodies, there are going to be more dead, and this is, again, why I'm going to say, for the millionth time, if you have a report that a hurricane is coming into your area and there is a call for evacuation, there is a good reason, there is any sign that it's going to be unmanageable, leave. Leave, leave, leave. You can get another house, you can get another car, you can get another porch, you can get another lawnmower, you can get another whatever. Take whatever is essential, family heirlooms and, photo albums, and get out. Do your best, board up some windows maybe, put some sandbags around the house if you can, but at the end of the day, a house means nothing if its owner's dead. Because the house is nothing without a homeowner. It's the whole point of a house. And let me say that it's not just you endangering yourself. And, I'd be more willing to be like, look, it's your own life. Do with it as you will. I like the idea of giving people that personal choice, personal freedom. But the problem is, and I've gotten this reflection from my time here in Ukraine, when you go to the people who stay in the frontline villages here, a lot of times they'll be adamant that they will never leave up until the last possible moment when it gets the worst. The Russians are at the gate of the city. The bombing is constant. All the public services have stopped. The stores have shut down. There's no more aid deliveries being made because it's too dangerous. And not only are there no more aid deliveries being made, but there's no way for them to go to the surface to gather whatever they could before because the bombing is just so constant. Or if they would, they risk immediate harm. And for those reasons, what before they were steadfast, they'd never leave, now they want to leave. But at that time, at that point, it might be too dangerous to evacuate them. It's more likely that they die during evacuation. More like, not necessarily it's 60% like, but I'm saying it's more likely than it would have been before. And they're not just endangering themselves, they're endangering whoever has to come out and evacuate them. And while, this obviously applies to the war zone, I think it applies to natural disasters as well. When you wait for the last possible moment, when you're stuck on your porch and the floodwaters are rising, and you're calling out for help, not only are you endangering the service people who have to come and help you, but you're also endangering the others who are stuck behind. Because for every extra person that they have to help, they could have been helping somebody else. And that can increase the death toll. That can increase the amount of people injured. That can increase the amount of people who are lost so they don't know where they are. And that also means that the service people, like is true over here, have to go out and put themselves in more danger, which might have not been necessary. So again, leave immediately. There's a million different ways we could take this conversation. We could talk about the intensification of climate disasters, which many scientists point to being caused by climate change, or at least contributed to by climate change. We had storm chasers in our community that were talking about when they were chasing the storm, finding 156 mile per hour winds on landfall. And this is torn through Florida, North Carolina, so many different states, and done so much damage. And my gosh, there's so many different states that are going to need support, so many communities are going to need support, and there has been some more given. FEMA has sent support. The Biden administration has sent support. But what's interesting is, while I don't think I was really going to talk about the Biden administration's support or aid to North Carolina really much at all, because this was just going to be a segment about, an update that, there's people dying, it's a tragedy. We want to get aid there as quickly as possible. We want to help as many people as possible. No expense should be held back upon to save the lives of Americans. That's not what the story is about anymore, because this immediately got picked up and ran into the 2024 election. Let me show you what was recently stated by Donald Trump about the flooding. Trump today says Kemp, this is the governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp, is having a hard time getting the president on the phone. That's interesting, but that's not the only thing he said. This was in response to a tweet by President Kamala Harris, which she said, "I was just briefed by FEMA Director Criswell on the latest developments about the ongoing impacts of Hurricane Helene. We also discussed our administration's continued action to support emergency response and recovery. I also spoke with the North Carolina Governor Cooper about the ongoing rescue and recovering efforts in North Carolina. Our administration will continue to stay in constant contact with state and local officials to ensure the communities have support and the resources they need. Doug and my thoughts are with all of those who lost loved ones and those whose homes, businesses, and communities were damaged by or destroyed during this disaster." Okay? Seems like a pretty typical response. Shows a picture of her like doing her job or whatever. It's pretty like a milquetoast, like there's a disaster. We are doing what's the government's meant to do. They're trying to show the public, that they are in control. That's the purpose of the post. Donald Trump responded, "Another fake and staged," capitalized of course, "photo from someone who has no clue what she is doing. You have to plug the cord into the phone for it to work. Biden and Harris abandoned Americans in Afghanistan. They sacrificed Americans to an open border, and now they have left Americans to drown in North Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, and everywhere else in the South. Under this administration, Americans have always come last because we have leaders who have no idea how to lead." Now, what gets me about these lies and stuff is if someone was to come out and said FEMA's not doing enough or the response should be quicker, there are communities that are under more stress than others that have good rights or good reasons to complain. Even if if a hurricane is still going on and flood waters are still rising, getting power back to those communities, obviously at that point you can't do it. I mean, there's flooding everywhere. There's a certain point where certain actions cannot be taken until, the situation stabilizes. But rescue efforts and stuff like that is super important. But instead of going for I heard of this story here, which could have been either due to local forces, like local government or federal government. No, it's just the governor can't call the president. Oh, this is all fake staged and they've abandoned all of the Americans in these states, just like they abandoned Americans in Afghanistan. Don't talk about the Doha Agreement. Don't talk about the Doha Agreement. Biden was asked about this, and this is what Biden had to say in response. Before I show you what Brian Kemp had to say about being told that he didn't call President Biden, or that President Biden did not call him.
He is lying. Let me get this straight. He's lying. And the governor told him he was lying. The governor told me he was lying. I've spoken to the governor, I spent time with him, and he told me he's lying. I don't know why he does this. And the reason I get so angry about it, I don't care about what he says about me, but I care what he communicates to the people that are in need. He implies that we're not doing everything possible. We are.
Now, whether or not you think that Biden is doing everything possible, the Trump lies about this are just super obvious to debunk. For example, he keeps saying he's lying about the governor. Lying about the governor? What governor are we referring to? We're talking about the governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp, who, by the way, a Republican governor. This is what he had to say about talking to the president of the United States, which Trump said he couldn't talk to.
So I just spoke. The president just called me yesterday afternoon. I missed him and called him right back. And he just said, hey, what do you need? And I told him, you know, we got what we need. We'll work through the federal process. He offered that if there's other things we need, just to call him directly, which I appreciate that. But
which I appreciate. That's a little different than the message that I was getting from Donald Trump. This is the governor he was talking about, that was getting stiffed by Joe Biden. And Joe Biden is calling him. Not only is Roy Cooper not having trouble getting in contact with him and calling Joe Biden is calling Brian Kemp before Brian Kemp calls Joe Biden. Not only was Donald Trump wrong, he was dead wrong. By the way, if he wants to get into this tit-for-tat political game of the politicization of disaster relief or not working for Americans in a time of crisis, Trump does not have the best record on this. He does not. And the record is clear. Back from the hurricanes back in 2017. Let me show you something. Here is Governor Roy Cooper talking about how they requested $90 million for Hurricane Matthew recovery after it hit and devastated the state of North Carolina. They received, of that $900 million request, $6.1 million, less than 1% of the resources that were needed to recover. Now you could say that this is a Democrat, Roy Cooper, whatever, but $6.1 million? Think about, I'm saying this as a Marylander. I remember when the Baltimore Bridge came down after it was rammed, and we were like, oh my God, this port, it's like 10th largest port in the most busy port in the country. It's super important for Maryland jobs. I was panicking. A lot of other people were panicking. We didn't know what was going to happen. I went over that bridge a week before it went down. And then the Biden administration came in and basically said, we're going to cover basically all the costs of recovery, all the costs of construction. And was putting down, if I remember correctly, it was like $1 billion or something dollars. I'd have to look back. Federal government, Baltimore Bridge construction amount. $1.9 billion. $1.9 billion. Pledged to pay 100% of the cost. So now look, that's different than a hurricane, but that's a disaster that affected my state that I was paying attention to. And when the Biden administration delivered, like as a Marylander, I had to pay attention to that. I had to pay attention to the president, that in a disaster like that, when our state's economy could have been crippled by the loss of the port, where we had people who were working to maintain that bridge dying, falling off the bridge. It was horrible. It was terrible. It was a tragedy for the state. In that moment, it was not a question of whether or not we were going to have the support we need. We got it immediately. We got the commitment. They pledged to pay 100% of it, which is good. Now, whether or not the bureaucracy works and how long it takes to rebuild and the exact process, it is expected to take shorter than originally estimated, which is good, but we can't completely give all the credit until the job is done. We're not simping for any politician here. But there is a difference here when it comes to basic decency, basic response to a tragedy or a crisis like this. And I do not think Donald Trump is the type of man who knows how to handle a crisis well. And so instead of talking about what would be better disaster relief, Donald Trump going out there saying, see, this is how FEMA could have done this better. See, this is what they should have done better. These are the communities that are going to be XYZ affected. Instead, they're abandoning these states. They're abandoning them. They're going to let them drown. It's horrible. It's terrible. There's no support. It's awful. It's horrible. It's awful. It's terrible. It's awful. Now, I want to show you what CNN had to say about how Trump is discussing this hurricane. And then I'm going to read you a message that Trump left about the hurricane in the last 24 hours.
He is clearly taking this seriously as a politician is on the ground trying to show that he is there in support of the people on the ground in Georgia. And of course, this comes as while he is, again, offering a message of unity. He has spent the last several days slamming Kamala Harris, his rival, for not being on the ground, for not helping with this storm. And I do want to...
A message of unity. Let me read you this. Trump spreads baseless theory that Democrats are withholding hurricane aid in quote-unquote Republican areas of North Carolina. Let me read you these messages from Truth Social, and I'll read them in their entirety because I think they deserve it. We are now heading to Georgia in order to pay my respects and bring lots of relief material, including fuel equipment, water, and other things to the state. Many politicians and law enforcement will be there. We'll be saying hello to Franklin Graham, Burt Jones, Tyler Harper, Mike Collins, Austin Scott, Russ Goodman, Sam Watson, and the mayor of Valdosta, Scott James. They are working very hard. I was going to stop into North Carolina, which has been hit really hard. I have a lot of supplies ready for them, but access and communication is now restricted, and we want to make sure that local emergency management is able to focus on helping people the most affected and not being concerned with me. I'll be there shortly, but, and this is the important part, don't like the reports that I'm getting about the federal government and the Democrat governor of the state going out of their way to not help people in Republican areas. MAGA. Not only is this a gross lie, and we know from Brian Kemp and other Republican governors that the president's saying, tell me what you need, tell me what you need, tell me what you need, which you could say that's still not enough, but that's what he's saying. Very different than saying, tell me what you need, but not in those rural places. Not only is this a gross lie, remember, people are dying, people are drowning. People are losing their homes, they're losing their livelihoods. This is doing billions upon billions of dollars worth of damage to multiple states. And instead of using the moment to just like concentrate on helping people or showing this message of unity that I've heard about on CNN, but I'm not seeing when I look at Donald Trump, he is instead painting this picture that Biden is looking around at the yard signs to decide which Americans get to drown and which Americans don't, which is just not happening. This is partisanship at its worst. This is the stuff that could really be damaging during a public health crisis or a natural disaster, where people might be getting the impression, oh, well, I'm not going to go try to get these resources because the government are not going to be there for me anyway. I guess I'm on my own. Oh, I'm in a Republican area and the government's not coming for me. I guess I'm on my own. I can't get evacuated. Why should I call emergency services? If I call emergency services, are they going to pick me up? Are they going to pick me up? That doesn't make much sense for them to pick me up if the government's not going to come and help me. Oh, if they send down the National Guard by the federal government, let's not go listen to the National Guard because the National Guard is only going to help the Republicans. Hell, I mean, the Democrats, hell, if the National Guard is sent down here to help the Democrats, maybe they're even dangerous to interact with. Ooh. And these might sound like silly conclusions, but when you're dealing with a subsect of the population who have already decided not to leave, let me tell you, they are not a sample size that is comparable to the entirety of the United States. It's going to be a special sample size, the same way that if you meet people who stay on the front line till the bitter end, it's going to be a special sample size. And we have enough people in this country that some of them are going to believe that this is true. They're going to run with it. And that could affect how they respond to a natural disaster. This is not the type of, this is what we had during COVID. This is what we had during C-19. When he was talking about drinking bleach, when he was talking about the sun, getting rid of it, and that when the sun comes around, don't worry, there's not going to be any C-19 anymore. He was saying all this nonsense. He was shooting from the hip, throwing nonsense out there, whatever was possible to help himself. C-19 being gone by the summer would have been good for his campaign, so therefore it's going to be gone in the summer. It was as simple as that. It was beneficial for him, so it was true. The idea that a Democratic-led administration wouldn't help Republican communities during a natural disaster, well, that's good for him electorally, especially in the state of North Carolina, which is a state that's very close right now, a swing state. It's not good. It's not good. This is the reason why people voted him out of office in 2020. And 4 years later, now with him as the oldest nominee in American history, nothing's changed. Okay? There's, yeah, you can teach an old dog new tricks, but not this old dog. Not this old dog. And let me tell you, he is not like pulling back at all. He is going like full throttle at the same time of all this. Because right now we're just talking about the North Carolina posts. Might as well read you this post. People are calling this the Purge post, but I don't like calling this the Purge post. The reason I don't like calling this the Purge speech, because this is a speech, and we're just going to read the text, because it's probably simpler, is that I think a lot of people watch too many movies, and now they don't recognize a lynch mob when they see one. Let me read this to you. This is from 1 day ago. What the hell is going on? See, we have to let the police do their jobs. And if they have to be extraordinarily rough. And you know the funny thing with all of that, look at the department stores. Same thing. They walk into you see these guys, they walk out with air conditioners, with the refrigerator on their back. The craziest thing, and the police aren't allowed to do their job. They're told if you do anything, you're going to lose your pension. You're going to lose your family, your house, your car. The police can okay. I understand they might have control over their pension. They're going to take your family. I'm sorry, you arrested a shoplifter. You don't have children anymore. Whatever. The police won't do it. The Border Patrol wants to do it. Border Patrol, they're incredible. They want to do it. They're not allowed to. Because the liberal left won't let them. The liberal left wants to destroy them, and they want to destroy our country. If you had this is the unity message we were hearing about. If you had one day, like one really rough, nasty day with the drugstores, as an example, when they went walking out with, she created something in San Francisco, $950 you're allowed to steal. Anything above that, you will be prosecuted. It works out that the $950 is a misnomer, because you can steal whatever you want. You can go way above, but you see it didn't want to go over the $950. They're standing with calculated, ending it up. These are smart people. They're not so stupid, but they have to be taught. Now, if you have one really violent day, like Mike Kelly put him in charge, Congressman Kelly put him in charge for one day. Mike, would you say he is right here? He's a great congressman. Would you say, Mike, that if you were in charge, you would say, oh, please don't touch them, let them rob your store? These stores go out of business, right? They don't pay rent. They're their city to survive. They'll hold. It's a chain of events. It's so bad. One rough hour, and I mean real rough, the word will get out, and it will end immediately, it'll end immediately. Can I just say here, as much as people might try to wiggle around and say, well, what he really meant, the fact that you have to do that with the President of the United States is already a failure. The President of the United States is supposed to be a figurehead. He's supposed to be a communicator. If you can't tell if the President of the United States is calling for a lynch mob or not, that's not a good sign. Hey, JP, thanks for the $10 to the Growing Protection Fund. Appreciate it. Oh, did I already miss it? And I saw it. Oh, I think I saw it earlier, read it, and I just gave him a second shout out for no reason. Doesn't matter. Thanks for the $10.